Okay, we've got the DC on, Geiger counter, our X-ray tube light bulb, and the ignition coil. As soon as I turn on my function generator, the relay will start firing away, and we should produce high voltage and generate some X-rays. There we go. Those are X-rays being generated from just an incandescent light bulb. Yes, you just saw X-rays emitted by a light bulb. Now, how did I do this? Well, first, we've got to know how to generate X-rays. And all we really need to know are the basics. It's actually quite simple. If you look at this diagram that I found of an X-ray tube online, you will see that the basics of an X-ray tube is actually quite simple inside. Now, looking at this diagram, inside of the tube is a vacuum. There's no air, there's no fill gas. You have your cathode and your anode. And on most X-ray tubes, you have a heated filament to encourage the emission of electrons across the gap. But that's not really relevant here at this moment. When a high voltage is applied across the cathode and the anode, typically 10,000 volts or more, industrial X-ray tubes can get up to 500,000 volts, that electron gets accelerated across the gap, and it hits the tungsten. Now, tungsten is a very, very dense material. When that electron hits it, relatively speaking, it doesn't actually hit anything, but when it gets close to it, that electron has to slow down. It slows down rapidly, and it gives off its kinetic energy in the form of an X-ray photon. Inside of an X-ray tube, where all the electron can do, all of its momentum can hit that tungsten, you can get a lot of X-rays. Inside of a light bulb, it's a little bit different. A light bulb only has a single filament. It also has a small fill gas inside of it. Now, the first thing that we needed was high voltage. My first attempt at this, I tried using this little furnace igniter here. The problem is, it does put out a high voltage. I don't think it actually puts out enough. I measured about 15 kV, but it puts out at a very, very high frequency, which I think was giving me issues. You can see by this picture here, I got some very, very pretty glow from the nitrogen inside the light bulb, but no emission of X-rays. So what we actually did for high voltage, because I know a little thing or two about old cars, is from the parts bin I had this old ignition coil, a relay, and the function generator switching the relay on and off. Very cheap way to produce high voltage. Okay, high voltage on the cheap. We've got this 35 amp DC power supply that goes with all my amateur radio stuff. A relay and a capacitor act as your points and condensers from like a car. 12 volt ignition coil from a car. Function generator switching the relay, and high voltage on the cheap. Maybe this will make X-rays. Now, how does it produce X-rays? Well, what I think is happening, and I'm no physicist, I'm just down here in my little dungeon playing around with high voltage, because who wouldn't? What I think is happening is I have another light bulb here, and I tried this with several different light bulbs. The small light bulb turned out to be the best. Now, what I think is happening on this light bulb with a tin foil hat is the high voltage is applied across these 2 points. The electrons accelerate through the fill gas, and they do strike it. You can see some arcing inside of the tube. Flies through all of the gas, through the glass, and hits this lead foil. And I think what happens is it still is carrying enough momentum to slow down just quick enough to produce an X-ray. Is this enough to take an image? I don't know. I'd like to try to find out in the future. But for now, I was able to make X-rays with an old ignition coil and a light bulb. I think we're off to a pretty good start here.